This 6-speed BMW M2 and this BMW M3 CS are two of, if not the coolest M cars that you can buy from BMW. Some of the last expressions of fuel-powered enthusiast driving. And in this video, we are going to check both of these cars out and see which one is the best. Powering the BMW M2 is an S58 3-liter turbo inline-6. This motor right here with 453 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque. And it can be paired either to the 6-speed manual transmission that's in this one or an 8-speed. And if you get the 8-speed, it does bump your 0 to 60 from 4.1 down to 3.9. But this, with the manual transmission, is a killer setup to have, and this car is rear-wheel drive. Under the hood of the M3 CS, you also have that same S58 3-liter turbocharged inline-6. However, it is a little different in this car. It's paired to an 8-speed, kind of like you can get on the M2, but the difference is 543 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque. And that's 40 horsepower over the M3 competition, which gives you 3.2 seconds to 60 miles per hour, which is impressive in itself. But one of the craziest things about this powertrain is that the regular version of it is pushing about 24.7 PSI of boost. In this car, it's pushing 30.5 pounds of boost. That is in diesel truck boost territory. This is an insane powertrain in this car, and it's paired to an all-wheel drive system, but it can also run in a two-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive mode. Now for the best part about a BMW M2, driving it. Woo! Oh my God, this car is fun. I know this has less power than the M3, but it really doesn't feel like it needs any more of it. And there's something about a turbo inline-6, especially paired with a manual transmission, that is just so good. I love driving this car. Now, the roads we're on right now, they're not very windy, so I can't talk a ton about the handling on this car, but I can assure you it handles very well. I mean, this is a BMW M2. Like we said at the beginning of the video, this is one of the top best driving cars that you can get from BMW's M division. That's the point. And yeah, this 6-speed just goes a long way toward making it even more fun to drive. Now the M3. Oh, wow. You know, it's funny, for both of these cars having the same engine, the character between the two of them actually feels surprisingly different. This M3 CS feels a lot more hardcore, even just in the powertrain alone. I mean, the sound that comes out of it when you go through the gears is shocking. We've got the green light. Let's do another quick acceleration here. Oh my God, that's so much fun. Oh yeah. Yeah, I like this car a lot. It is really good to drive. That has not been lost out of the BMW M3 by any stretch of the imagination. This is a super, super fun car. And I mean, this is just driving it on some local roads here in Greenville, South Carolina, where BMW is doing Test Fest. But driving it on some mountain roads like we have in Colorado would be the real test. Getting it on either windy roads there or on the track, because that's what these cars, especially this one, are really about. Some of the really cool things about this BMW M2 are its size and shape. Because it's a two-door, it can be more compact, have a fairly small footprint, but it's still a fairly wide car, which means it handles really well, as we'll see momentarily. It's also got a really nice set of M-branded brakes. Now, where the BMW M2 does well with its components, the M3 CS goes completely over the top. It's really no comparison. This car has adaptive suspension, forged wheels, carbon ceramic brakes, carbon hood, carbon roof, carbon mirror caps, carbon bodywork along the bottom of it. There is an insane amount of very race-like components going onto this car. Inside of the BMW M2, you'll find that, by my account, somebody spec'd this car very well, because that light blue and this tan upholstery is a hell of a combination. And you've got the BMW M Racing colors here in the door card, surrounded by some of that tan upholstery. You have this really nice round steering wheel, which actually in this car seems very fitting. It's not that often anymore that we're finding round steering wheels in performance cars. Most of them have gone to a flat bottom wheel, but I really like this wheel in this car. You have some of the M colors also stitched here into the wheels, and you have these programmable M buttons here at the top of the steering wheel. Of course, some carbon on the wheel, but not too many buttons here. Keeps it relatively simple. And then up at the top of the dash, you have the new BMW curved display. This is something that's making its way through BMW's lineup. It's a 12.3-inch screen in front of me here, and a 14.9-inch screen in the center. They're really sharp. They look fantastic. That is a really nice piece of technology in this car, and technology is a lot of what this car is about. If you're all about changing all kinds of settings about how the vehicle drives, your traction control, launch control, and customizing all of those things, if you love to nerd out on those details, then this is the car for you. But one area where they've kept it very analog, which I appreciate, is this 6-speed manual transmission. There's nothing over the top about that, just some good old school driving character. Now, to nobody's surprise, the back seat is not really what the M2 is about, but it does have a back seat, and thankfully I am not one of my ginormous coworkers, because I'm only 5'10", and that means I can sort of fit depending on how far back the seat's gonna go. Yeah, it's not a roomy back seat. I don't think that that's the intention, nor the reason that anyone is buying an M2. However, there are some actually cool things back here. I do have my own climate vents, which is a surprising luxury to be afforded to the passenger of a rear seat in a vehicle this size. And kind of like the front, I have the M colors here on the seat belt as well, which I really like. The other cool thing about this car is that you do feel like you're in a very tight cockpit. It feels like this is a compact, athletic vehicle because of its smaller footprint, and I like that a lot. Aside from that, this is actually a pretty compliant car. It's fairly comfortable over bumps. It doesn't feel super aggressive. You could cruise around in this car, go for a Sunday drive, and not feel like you're getting beat up. I mean, this isn't likely to be most people's daily because it doesn't have a ton of space. It's not a massive trunk. Obviously a very small back seat, but aside from that, it is plenty civilized enough for you to drive on a pretty daily basis and be comfortable in. Inside of the M3 CS, you find an even more extreme interior, and that starts when you get in the car and you slide into these carbon fiber bucket seats. It is a little bit of an awkward operation because it's got really extreme bolstering, and of course you have this hump here in the center of your seat cushion that you have to navigate around, but once you're in, you are really locked in. I mean, there is no amount of lateral force that's having you go anywhere. Also in this car, you have this nicely wrapped steering wheel, also round, also has the center marker here at the top of the wheel, also has programmable buttons, also has carbon on it. So in some ways relatively simple. Of course, this being an 8-speed, you do have paddle shifters here, and you've got the same curved display. So some similarities, at least with the M2 interior, but this is just more aggressive. They take it even further because this is the M3 CS. So it's a very hardcore version of the M3. And here in the center, you have your shifter for the 8-speed. Like the steering wheel, it is stitched with the BMW racing colors. You have your infotainment controls, your start-stop button, but that's about it. The backseat of the M3 CS is without a doubt more comfortable than the M2's backseat because you have a lot more space. I'd even argue that it's probably more comfortable than the front seats in this M3 because you don't have such aggressive bolstering, and from the back you get a pretty impressive view of these carbon bucket seats. That is something pretty cool to look at. You can see where a lot of that lightness comes in. There's a bunch of holes in the back of the seat. And then these back seats themselves have some interesting components to them as well. Kind of like the M2, you have these M colors here on your seat belts. And something that I find pretty interesting is that the sides, and just the sides of these headrests, are red. It's the kind of thing that you might not notice at first glance, but it is pretty cool. Unlike the back seat of the M2, however, you don't have your own climate vents, which is kind of funny. Now, the thing that's surprising me the most about this M3 is the fact that I'm not really getting beat up as much as I thought I would. These seats are very aggressive, but because this has that adaptive suspension, it's actually not that uncomfortable in the way that it goes over the road. Maybe it would be a different story in Colorado because our roads out there are really, really bad, but the bumps that I'm driving over here, they seem fine. I think this car handles it really well. The thing that would worry me is that carbon front splitter. That, going over some steep driveways, would probably give me a little bit of anxiety, but otherwise this car is really good to drive. Now, say what you will about the second generation M2's styling, but in this shade of blue, it's definitely striking to look at. And something else that's great on this car are the proportions. It has very noticeable fender flares, which gives the car a really nice stance. The M3 CS has a much harsher, more track-focused appearance to it because of the pretty intense aero that's going on here with that carbon fiber splitter and the body kit in general. You also have this gray that is mixed with these gold wheels, which I love the design of, and you can see some of the carbon fiber in the hood, you can see it on the roof, you can see it in the mirror cap. So this is obviously a very aggressive vehicle, but the best thing about the styling on this are those yellow running lights. I wish more cars had ambers like that. Now, this M3 CS is impressive in a lot of ways, and that includes the price tag. These start around $120,000 because there are massive upgrades compared to any other version of the M3, which starts more around the $84,000 range. This M2, on the other hand, is about $63,000 starting price. So if you want to get into something more affordably, certainly this is the way to go. However, I will say, for that money, you get a lot. And if you want to hear another impressive stat, how about the fact that this M3 CS weighs only about 101 pounds more than this M2? That's pretty impressive for a four-door car. So yeah, you are paying a lot of extra money to get into this M3 CS, but that being said, you do get a lot extra. So it depends which one of these is the best for you. Do you want all-wheel drive, four doors, and more power, or do you want a rear-wheel drive, 6-speed coupe? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll catch you all in the next video.